we've gone kind of full circle where it started with bloggers and the idea of like, my own journal and whatever. It moved over into social media. I think people are now pulling back a little bit from social media or kind of reevaluating their relationship with social media and looking at alternatives. I just think people are going to be much more choosy and are going to really evaluate, what am I posting? Where am I posting it?
Welcome back to the show. This is our final episode for 2023. We are rounding out the year with a great episode. We have the wonderful Leah Haberman on our show today. Insider named her as a top creator economy expert to know. Leah started her career as an entertainment director for E! Entertainment Network. And one of the things that she saw there was the power of having people talk about the shows. And I don't know if you remember this back in the day, that a lot of the shows on Bravo and E! Entertainment, they would have the stars of those shows create blog posts on their websites about that week's episode. And then people could comment and they could engage with it and talk about what was going on the show. And one of the things that Leah saw when she was at E! Entertainment was the power of having people talk about what was going on. This kind of spurred her interest in the influencer space, the creator space, social media. And today she is considered an expert in this space. She publishes a popular weekly newsletter called ICYMI, in case you missed it. And really has a great perspective on influencer and the creator economy and how it is that we are being influenced. We had such a great conversation. Leah and I are both very interested in how the creator, the influencer space is impacting everything from how we vote to how we shop to how we think about all different kinds of issues. Leah gives us her key predictions for the new year for 2024 and beyond. I think this is a really interesting episode that if you have, again, like me, an interest in the cultural phenomenon and what kind of impact creators and influencers are having on us as everyday people, I think you'll find this episode really interesting, lots of insights. So we are going to jump right into it. Leah, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It's good to be here.
Well, I am so excited to talk with you because we both have been in this space a long time and understand the creator, the influencer space. But let's start with your career first. You started as an editor. You were on the editorial side. And you spent a good number of years at E! Entertainment. Can you talk a little bit about what your responsibilities were there?
Yeah, so that was kind of my first big job out of college. I worked at E! for almost 10 years and then also worked for a while at Style Network because they were both owned by NBC Universal. So I worked very much in the entertainment and style space. So I kind of got, I would say, a little bit of experience in as social was launching essentially, and the early influencers or creators were launching, both celebrities who were the original influencers. I moderated the show pages, message boards for E! At the very beginning, which was kind of a hot mess. Anybody gives you like, don't read the comments. That was literally my job, was to read the comments. In those days, you had somebody moderating the message boards of the shows. At the time, they were really bloggers, which bloggers were the original, you had celebrities, then you had bloggers, then you had influencers, now you have creators. When I worked at Style Network, you had people like Bag Snob, you had people like Tom and Lorenzo, you had people, I'm trying to think of like all these, people that were at the front row of fashion shows, that were live blogging fashion shows and sharing their photos on Instagram, live blogging on their blogs. And we, like, to us, that was UGC content. And we were putting stuff on the Style Network website and, pulling. It was amazing because the fashion editors weren't doing it. The retailers weren't doing it. the, models and designers weren't doing it at that stage. The only people that were sharing from the fashion shows were these fashion bloggers. And so it was like these new people that were giving you an inside look that to me was way more interesting than kind of like the very professional, polished look that was coming out of the fashion shows that was very controlled. It was a very controlled message. And so this was kind of like a VIP backdoor entrance to what was going on inside the fashion world. That was kind of my entry into something's shifting. There's like a new way of getting things across to people. And I want to be part of this.
I want to ask you, because you had this really unique vantage point. You were on these message boards and probably starting to see what an amazing tool this instant feedback. Was it welcomed by the higher ups at E?
That's a really loaded question. I will say it was appreciated by me. I thought it was super interesting, and it was the start of a two-way conversation, which social media became. I don't want to like put words in anybody's mouth. I do not think at the time people really grasped the potential of like, oh, hey, we can see what people watching our shows are interested in, or, who they're most interested in, the moments that resonate, the people, the characters they hate or whatever. I'm not sure that it was like fully grasped. Again, I don't want to kind of, paint anybody into like they loved it, they hated it, whatever. I'm not sure that the full potential of what we were seeing was realized. But I think just for me, as the person that was like at that time, because I was much, earlier in my career, sitting at the desk, being the person kind of on the front lines, talking to people on Twitter, Instagram, talking to people on the message boards and getting all of that input. I think for me, it just set the stage of like, this is amazing. We're putting stuff out there, but now we're also getting stuff back. And I think that if you were maybe a little bit further along in your career, especially in media, you had been used to very much, it's a one-way street, one-way communication. You're blasting out to people. And so I think from my perspective of seeing feedback come back to us, now there's just an expectation. There is that expectation. We don't just blast a message out there. We run polls. We listen to what people are interested in. I think creators do that too. Like, do you like this? What do you want to hear from me? What should I wear today? What should I do? I think now it's much more common and appreciated. Was it then? I don't know. I don't think people grasp the potential.
So we talked about this evolution of how advertising marketing worked, right? Let's talk about the evolution of who are these people who have built a social media following and are now what you consider to be creators, influencers. Talk a little bit about the evolution of, let's say, the person who said, I want to have an online journal, to what we see now as these powerhouse creators.
Well, I think it's kind of funny because I actually think blogs are coming back. So everything is cyclical. So if you had a blog, hopefully you kept it up. If you didn't keep it up, go dig up the username and password to that blog, relaunch it. I think we went from blogs, social media, I would say like by 2010, 2012, everybody switched to social media, especially if you switched to Instagram or Twitter. I would say it was shorter, faster, easier. Blog took more time. It was longer. It required more effort. And I think social media, it was more visual. You could reach, that was kind of where the audience was shifting. So you could reach more people. And I think it was just a lower lift to be able to publish stuff there and connect with more people, build a community. There was a little bit more back and forth as we started to see that kind of like conversation happening. And so, things were evolving. What we're seeing now, I would say, is because of the way social media has evolved, because of multiple factors, like audience attention shortening, platforms pushing, like platform algorithms. Adam Mosseri saying that like, okay, people's attention is shifting to DMs and stories. The platform has to take some responsibility for that because the algorithm kind of pushed our friends and family out of the feed in favor of advertisers and creators and kind of pushed our friends and family interactions to DMs and stories. So, it's the chicken or the egg. Like, was it the audience? Was it the platform? Whatever.
Mm-hmm.
We're spending more time connecting with the people we know in DMs and stories. So things are shifting. I think creators are trying to figure out, where is my audience? How do I connect with the people that were in my community that I want to have a close relationship with? And I think given the volatility also of, especially like you look at Twitter or X or whatever we're going to call it next year, and people are seeing like a platform could get renamed, it could disappear, it could be entirely overhauled in a way that I'm not comfortable with. And I think creators are realizing I need to take more ownership of how I put out my content and how I connect with my community. That's nothing new. I think it's just become more and more important. So at this stage, creators are looking at, okay, where can I own my content? Where can I own that relationship with my audience? And so that's why I think we're going to see a return to blogs. I think we're seeing something of a return to newsletters. I put out a newsletter. Obviously, I'm very pro newsletter. There's data out there that suggests Gen Z doesn't love email. So, I'm always kind of watching that, trying to understand, like, does Gen Z like email? Do they not? Will they open newsletters? Will they not? The thing with Gen Z is that like half of them are still in high school and college. They haven't joined the workforce. Once they join the workforce, part of working is having emails, interoffice email with partners and vendors and whatever. So there's a very good chance that once Gen Z enters the workforce and becomes part of the workforce, that they, start to embrace more and more email. So like newsletters could end up being fine. So, blogs, newsletters, maybe a little bit more into YouTube and the idea of kind of long form video. We've gone kind of full circle where it started with bloggers and the idea of like, my own journal and whatever. It moved over into social media. I think people are now pulling back a little bit from social media or kind of reevaluating their relationship with social media and looking at alternatives. It doesn't mean that they're leaving. I don't think that this is, is social media dead? Is this like doom and gloom? Not necessarily. I just think people are going to be much more choosy and are going to really evaluate, what am I posting? Where am I posting it? I'm seeing a lot of repurposing. And I think previously, whenever I was advising, whether it was brands or creators, it would be like, do not repurpose. You should really be respecting each platform individually. We are seeing people repurpose because they're spread so thin, because they're, posting on all these platforms, plus they want a blog, plus they want a newsletter. It's a lot for one person to do. So at this point, when I'm talking to people, I'm saying, if you have to repost just to show up on a platform, repost. If, as you start to look at the data coming in and understand what platforms are you performing on and what are you not, you can decide, do you want to be on that platform if your content is not resonating on that platform? Or do you think it's worth, maybe do you need to tweak the content and try and start optimizing for that platform? Like, is it worth it for you? So I think people are just going to get a lot more selective about where they show up.
We started with the blogs. You had a much more direct relationship, whereas the social platforms were considered more like rented. You're renting that or leasing that space. And the second that the platform started messing around with the algorithm, I remember when a lot of the algorithm stuff, especially on Instagram, people lost a third of their audience from seeing content. I think that's why you also have people starting Substacks and you have people doing podcasts. You finding ways to have more of those direct relationships. If you're a creator or an influencer, the platforms can't just turn you off, which theoretically now, like TikTok could decide you have 1 million followers. I'm only going to show your content to 10% of them, right? Which is what happens.
Yeah. I also think when you're a creator, so for anybody in the audience that's a creator and is listening, you do have to think about like 5 to 10 years down the road. And creators tend to follow like a path. I mean, influencers and creators it's like a relatively new industry. So it's not like that we have that much historical data, but traditionally it tends to be, they become, like you said, they have blogs, podcasts, they become almost like mini media companies themselves.
Yeah.
Or you've got like Addison Rae. There's a couple of people that have managed to break into the entertainment industry. They become hosts on shows. They become reality TV stars. They manage to go into the entertainment industry. Or they become entrepreneurs. The D'Amelio sisters, they launch their own brands, Mr. Beast, Alex Cooper. Alex Cooper, I would say, is kind of a mix of entrepreneur, media company. Like she's maybe all things in one, but I think it's just, so you're like entrepreneur, you're an entertainer, or you're a media company. And that is typically, the three paths most often that an influencer will take. Unless I would say the alternate is they go in-house at a brand based on all of the skills, the knowledge, the market knowledge, the audience knowledge that they've accumulated. They go in-house and start acting as a marketer for, one of their favorite brands or brand, that they're comfortable with, familiar with, that they love. So they get hired and they kind of go to the other side, go behind the camera essentially, and start working as a marketer. So I think as a creator, I think it's a really good idea to think about, okay, like this is fun. Creating content is great. 1 year, 2 year, 3 years, getting brand deals. But like 5-10 years down the road, where do I see myself going? And I don't think you want to rely on just brand deals and creator funds for, 10, 20 years. Like that's just not sustainable. So I think it's worth thinking about, what does the future hold? And like, what would I most like to do? Who can I look at? And admittedly, it's a pretty small pool at the top of these people, at the very top, but like whose career path looks most interesting to me?
Right. Yeah. And I do think one of the things though, that I have seen in terms of this space of people building a social media presence, I feel like it has permeated into almost every single profession, right? If you think about it, there are people who are doctors, let's say. I have information that I want to share with me. I'm a gynecologist. I have information I want to share with women about things that they should be thinking about. I can't reach everybody in my private practice, but if I go on social media, I can create this presence there. And then they do that and they build momentum and they have success. And so then they create these brands and they build a business out from it. That's just an example, right? Of doctors. Yeah. I cannot think of an industry people in the industry could not benefit in some way from a social media presence. How do people think about this in terms of permeating into what they do day to day?
Personal brand is just becoming more and more important. I think it was last year, the study came out that Gen Z now looks information up on social media more than they do search engines. Mm-hmm. You look at whether it's your LinkedIn page, your Instagram profile, your TikTok profile. Is there enough information there that it could be comparable to a Google or a Bing search result? You've got to think about, I think it depends on your audience. You want to make sure that you're showing up where you think your audience or your potential customer or consumer or whatever is going to be looking, but can they find the information about you? And I think it really helps. It helps vouch for you if you have something out there that people can find the information that you want to intentionally craft and put out there. Because I think what's really important is a lot of times people think, a personal brand is based on the information that you're sharing. But I would say it's the information you're sharing. It's what other people are saying about you. But it's also like the information you're not putting out there. So like if you're not on social media, that's also contributing to your personal brand. Like, why are you not on social media? And it might be a totally benign reason, but it might be because people think you hate social media when you don't. Mm-hmm. You don't understand social media. You're out of touch. You don't understand technology. You might. Like, it's just you're creating an impression or kind of a void of information that people are going to fill in their own minds. So I think the most important thing that you can do, even if it's fine, you don't have to be an influencer. You don't have to have 10, 20, 30,000 followers. But I think you have to be intentional about how you build your profile or how you build the perception of yourself online and put the information out that you want to have out there so that you are creating that personal brand that you have control over versus letting somebody else say something or versus letting somebody else create a perception of you based on lack of information online.
We just finished a study that we released where we kind of found that social media in a lot of ways, especially as it relates to women in work, is a great equalizer, right? It's women were using it to, across generations, we found that women were using it to look for new jobs, to build their personal brands, which would help them in their careers, to network. They were using it for all of these reasons. And it's a tool that can be really valuable. But to your point, there's also the downside of social media. Now, we obviously are focused a lot in the women's space. And one of the things that we hear from many female influencers, creators, is that they deal with an enormous amount of criticism, no matter what content they create, no matter who they are. They get comments. They get comments about their appearance. They get comments about how maybe they parent. They get comments about everything. What do you think the downside of all of this is on our culture?
I mean, that's a huge question. The optimist in me is that the platforms are forever trying to increase moderation tools, increase, empowering creators to help them, whether it's like block people, mute people, help provide tools for people's mental health. But then every time we see them do that, we see a new study come out about, teenagers and their mental health being harmed and, predators. And it feels like one step forward, two steps back. I feel like we're at a little bit of an impasse. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's contributing to this sense where everybody's waiting to see what happens. And I think it also contributes to people's kind of ambiguous feelings about social media now. I think like the first half of, 2010 to like 2015, 16, everybody loved social media. We can connect, we can talk to our friends, we can, find new things, learn new things, meet new people. And I think the past, few years have just been like, we've seen the dark side of it. And we're at a little bit of a tipping point right now, I think, in people's attitudes, but also like AI. What is it going to do to social media? Is it going to improve social media, or is it going to be, is it going to be the thing that kind of turns us off, where it's going to be less about, toxic or predatory content, and it's going to be more about an influx of generic AI generated content that we cannot sift through fast enough, because obviously AI is going to be able to generate content faster than we can read it. So I feel like we're kind of at we had like part one, part two, we are now on the precipice of part three, and nobody really knows yet what that's going to look like. So it could go in any direction. It's very hard to predict at this stage. I love social media. I love the internet. I love social media. I love all of the good elements and aspects and the connectivity and opportunities for communication that it creates. So I'm rooting for it. It's just, we don't know. We don't know where it goes.
I think that is a incredibly thoughtful response. I agree with you. I'm a big believer that there's some unbelievably positive elements of social media. I mean, the connecting to people. But I also think if you think about the pandemic as a little bit of a sort of small, almost like it was a lifeline for so many people during the pandemic. But on the other hand, we know that there's so much research that shows that it had also a really negative effect on our psychology, especially on younger people. So I think you're right. This is an industry that has grown significantly. I think we're still in this place where it's going to continue to evolve and evolve quickly. So, okay, well, we are kind of at the very end here, but I would ask you one last question, which is, do you have any big, bold prediction that you think we should be, or something we should be looking at next? Like, what is the next thing we should be expecting or looking at in this space?
I put out a newsletter recently. So I was going to put out my own predictions, and I thought I'll poll my audience and get their predictions just to kind of like intersperse. People gave so many interesting answers that I decided people hear from me every week. Nobody needs my predictions. I'm just going to incorporate what people said. And I decided to kind of like touch on some of the big things. One was a lot of people were very into short form video. I'm actually going to kind of add a twist to that. So a lot of the marketers who responded to my poll about predictions for 2024, short form video, I think is going to have a hard time in 2024. creators can't necessarily monetize short form video. And now that TikTok's, creativity program is paying you for videos that are longer than 60 seconds, I actually think that video is going to start to get longer. So I would say for a brand marketer or a creator, I think we're going to start to see an increase in the length of video. I think YouTube has been the gold standard in terms of long form video, and most creators seem to be the best paid. So I have always said from the very beginning, always look to the YouTube creators. Those seem to have been the people that have been kind of like sitting up there, happiest, most well paid. Like, look to those guys. I think we're going to see a lot more people kind of aim towards that. Not necessarily. And when I say long form video, that does not mean like an hour.
Right.
Certainly an increase from over, a 10, 20-second video, maybe a couple of minutes, maybe a 9-minute video. Everybody pointed towards audio. And I think that is absolutely valid. I think audio is going to be huge. There was somebody who pointed out, and I thought this was a really good observation, that Adam Mosseri and his team on Threads really nailed it with Threads gives you the option to upload audio caption, describes the audio caption, plus has an audio version. So the idea of like audio podcasts, video podcasts, LinkedIn live events, or audio events, anything audio, trending audio. I definitely agree. I think audio is going to be huge, but I think it's always going to have a mixed media or multimedia component. So it's not necessarily just audio on its own, but it's video podcasts. It's Threads captions that are both written and audio. So it's kind of like mixing audio with something else. We're on LinkedIn right now. I think LinkedIn is having a renaissance, and I think more and more creators are getting on LinkedIn. We saw a lot of articles this year that were like, teens love LinkedIn. Sorry, but LinkedIn is cool again. Gen Z is LinkedIn's fastest growing segment. And like I said, a lot of Gen Z is still in high school and college. They're going to be joining the workforce. I think they're going to be joining LinkedIn. I think what that's going to do, not only for creators, would I encourage them to join LinkedIn. And there's a great creator called Taz Zammit, Zammit, who's a TikToker, a very successful TikToker, but who also publishes on LinkedIn. She's a really good model to watch of like, how do you as a TikTok creator, for example, onboard on LinkedIn? But I also think it's going to change the nature of LinkedIn. I think LinkedIn is going to get funnier, slightly shorter. We're not going to see these like essays. I think it's going to start to kind of adapt to incorporate content models that we've seen on Instagram captions, TikTok captions, tweets. I think we're going to see the nature of LinkedIn shift slightly as it gets more Gen Z and more creators on the platform.
Really insightful. Thank you, Leah Haberman, for spending this time with us today. I am so grateful. People want to follow you. What is the best way for them to do that?
Probably, I would say either on LinkedIn, Twitter, or X, if you're still on there, Instagram or Threads, or if you want to subscribe to my newsletter, it's called ICYMI, in case you missed it, on Substack, and it's leahhaberman.substack.com.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. If you're an influencer or a brand that wants to work with us, please feel free to email us at info@shespeaks.com. Until next time.